But today's webinar is called Train Once, Execute Always. So this is the last webinar in a series that we started back in the spring. And I think it really kind of wraps everything up in a nice little bundle to Meez's core use and how most people use it day to day. There are ancillary functions, of course, inventory, menus, invoice processing. But when we first launched Meez, and still to this day, the core of our product is digital recipe database, with that database of system ingredients, conversions, letting you get really granular with unit of measure equivalencies that ultimately to, as we this was a line that we used years and years ago when we first launched, but Meez is here to make your recipes work harder for you. So to put recipes in front of your team that answer their questions, that are more direct, that are keep them focused and consistent, is really what we're going to cover today, and all the different ways that we can do that, all the different ways that you can create recipes based on who's reading that recipe, and ultimately the biggest impact on your food cost. We can do everything theoretically, but this is where we impact your actual food costs. Are your cooks following the recipe? Are you wasting less food because items aren't going up in the past that aren't making it to the table because they were prepared improperly? Or even worse, customers aren't sending food back that has to be comped because it wasn't prepared properly. So for all those reasons, we come back to recipes as the IP, the property that drives your restaurant, your original creations. And also in Meez, we like to think of your recipes and your menus as the blueprint for success, for how your business will succeed as well, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sergio. And I've seen a couple more people trickle in, and we're almost at 5 past the hour. So without further ado, let's dive into it and talk about it. So, hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar: Train Once, Execute Always. How Meez fuels consistency in the kitchen. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Nicole Davis. I'm a customer success manager here at Meez. Likewise, Sergio is also a customer success manager, and we are here to make sure that operators and chefs are making the most of the platform and that they're set up for success. So, as Sergio kind of mentioned already, we're going to cover today, why there's consistency slips in the kitchen, and then we'll show you how Meez solves these issues with some real examples. Sergio is going to take us through some live demos and share some success stories, and then we'll wrap up with some pro tips and resources that you can take back to your team. So by the end of this webinar, you should leave with some actionable steps to help your team roll out Meez and achieve consistency across every shift in the kitchen. So Sergio, I'm going to hit you with a question. Why do you think teams aren't as consistent as they could be?
Sure. So for those of you that haven't been on our webinars before, I'm Sergio Hernandez. I'm, like Nicole, a customer success manager here at Meez. And I have a lot of perspective on this. I spent most of my life in kitchens, 25 some years as a cook, almost exclusively, and then also dabbled in some front of house. And I've also worked in the supply chain side of things as a specialty food purveyor and importer. Um, but the main reason your team isn't as consistent as we might think, and there might be edge cases, of course, but ultimately, I know that the recipes that I was trained on over the years, and I'm really old, so we're talking about centuries or decades ago. These are paper recipes that aren't dynamic. Ultimately, there's always something to interpret in a recipe, no matter how detailed we've been. There's always going to be the situation where we don't have enough of one ingredient maybe to make the whole batch of this recipe. So we're going to have to do some math to scale it properly, or somebody wants a double batch, or I just have to come up with the right amount of this recipe. So that right there, that math is obviously an issue about that can address consistency. We didn't hire mathematicians. We hired line cooks because they're good cooks, because they can season, because they can really, work well under pressure for all those reasons. But usually skills is not one of them. So when we need them to scale a recipe that is in ounces and in grams and in cups and in different volumes like that, we can have some issues, of course. Additionally, things to interpret are techniques that in a paper recipe, and you can add images to it, of course. Meez lets you add videos down to the detail. Every prep step in your recipe can have a video, as we'll be showing on this webinar, and there are no limit to how many prep steps you can create. So we're going to show you some examples of getting really, really granular with that. And then, yeah, so we have the variable training methods, misinterpreted recipes often, and then incorrect scaling can be the biggest issues that we have here.
Yeah.
One other important thing. Oh, sorry, Nicole.
No, totally. And one thing I like to think of too is it's a digital place where the recipes live, right? So this can be your one source of truth where everyone is going to knowing that they're looking at the latest version of that recipe, that this is the one we want to be made every single time.
Yeah. Um, so the impact is real when you have issues like, maths, improper scaling, anything like that. This could inflate your food costs, as I mentioned, with items not making it to the table, being comped, and something just being prepared improperly. But one other important thing that isn't often brought up when it comes to good training is well-trained cooks stick around longer. And I think most people will agree with that. Whether you've been a cook yourself that was mismanaged and you have somebody holding you accountable for something you were never shown properly, or you've probably experienced this and said, oh, if only we could train these guys better, they'd probably stick around longer because then you empower them to be, good at their job and good at what they do. And everybody feels immediately rewarded by that, of course.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk a little bit about how Meez is going to fix this and make sure that every cook nails it every time. So Sergio, if you want to show us some examples of some of the things that you mentioned as being some issues and how Meez can solve those issues of inconsistency.
Yep, of course. Sorry, I'm reshuffling my screens around here, and I'm going to share my screen and walk you guys through a couple of different recipes here. So here on the screen, we have a recipe that's also shared with me in view only mode too. So if you're not already using this feature, this is a great way to share with your team, of course, so that they don't have access to edit or make this a permanent, or you possibly accidentally delete the recipe or make permanent changes to it. Um, but again, this is a centralized recipe with lots of media. Obviously, the hero image there showing you the finished product, but every prep step can have its own image or up to 2 minutes of video. So we're creating a slideshow here.
All right, so
that captures audio as well as video. That was all shot over the chef's shoulder with a phone. So it's that easy. You launch Meez on your phone. For anybody that hasn't done that, Meez does not need an app to download. It is a web app. So you simply go to appgetmeez.com, log in like you would on a desktop, and you will have access to all these features and able to often delegate to a sous chef the recipes that you've uploaded, making sure that there's images in there. Each video can be up to 2 minutes long and no limit to how many prep steps. So you can imagine how much bandwidth that gives you. Now, additionally, this also helps with real-time updates. If I'm the chef of this recipe and I've made a change and I've made this 140 grams of salt as well, I'm actually not the owner of this. This was shared with by one of my customers for these demos. But as soon as they made that change, as soon as I open this recipe, since they changed it, I'm going to get a banner popping up across the top telling me that it's been updated so I can make sure to stop and look in case I've got it memorized. But this digital recipe, of course, gives me access to everything I need to make this. The sub recipes, I can scale the sub recipes within them, and we'll get into scaling in a minute, but gives me all of that information. And again, let's jump right into smart scaling. So this is the kind of recipe where I want my cooks to be mindful of how much pork they're cooking. And we made it based on 40 pounds because we had the right sum recipe, but we can cut open, it'd be really 1 in a million that we cut open a few packs of Boston butt pork shoulder and get exactly 40 pounds, right? So I want my cooks to cut open a few packs, put them on the scale, whatever they've been prescribed, and put on exactly how much pork they're about to cook. 34.8 pounds. Now that's going to change my salt and pepper mix and my braising liquid. And I didn't have to do the math that was 0.87. I'm simply putting in how much weight I'm starting with, if that's my key ingredient, but any of these ingredients can be my scaling factor. So ultimately, as I like to say, is meez lets you scale by batch size. You need a triple batch, great. You need your yield. So if you need 200 pounds of pork, pulled pork as your finished product, then you know what you need to start with to get that, and the exact quantities that you would use there. And then, like I showed, by any ingredient in the recipe itself there. Okay. So additional examples here that we can talk about. And one thing that I've mentioned here is it doesn't even have to be a recipe. Meez can be such an amazing training guide without even really building a recipe. I want my cooks to know how to cut salmon the way I cut salmon. Every kid I hired, especially out of culinary school, tells me they know how to butcher salmon, but do they know how to butcher it the way I need them to, the way my restaurant, my establishment does? I can create a whole slideshow showing them I want a perf pan, I want an ice bath, I want everything laid out exactly like this. And then step by step, you want to show them how to trim the belly properly, how to skin it. Yeah. And this can become just one part of a training module. So that you're really able to get this information in front of your cooks. And of course, here the quantities are less important. It's more about the technique that you want to put down here for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what about for, if you know your chefs well and you're like, they're not going to measure something out every single time they make it. How do you get around that with like building out the custom scoops and things like that?
Yeah, yeah. So Meez has a lot of units, like number 4 scoops built in here. And this is the kind of situation where I say, you know who's reading these recipes. You probably have your pizza marinara sauce dialed in. Okay, it's equal parts, 1 can of each of these products. Great, that makes your marinara sauce. And then when you get into something like how much cheese should be on this pizza, you buy the cheese by the pound, so you know that's how you're being charged, and maybe you want 4 ounces of cheese on this pizza. That scoop is about 4 ounces of weight there. But we know that if we write 4 ounces of cheese or 200 grams, our cooks are never going to be weighing that when they're in the middle of battle and putting out pizza after pizza. They're grabbing a handful every time. So rather than having them grab a handful and having every pizza end up with a different amount, we can create or we can use some of these scoops that are already in meats. Now, if we wanted to create a cheese scoop, because the number 4 scoop is actually 3.85, we can also do that here. So say I want to make a cheese scoop. Okay, I've already done that. So I'm gonna go ahead and make another cheese scoop 2. So here, when it says add a new unit, I'm creating that unit. Easy enough. The unit name can be whatever I want it to be. It can be cheese cup, whatever you want it to be. And then here, we're going to tell it exactly how much that cheese scoop should be. We want this to be 4 ounces of weight. And that way, I know I'm getting the 4 ounces that I want on that pizza every time. If that's what the cooks are filling, and we train them to make sure that they're using that every time, but we also see that this is giving me those 4 ounces that I need. Because of course we buy that product by the pound, and we'll see that in costing, which is part of the recipe your cooks don't need to see, but we want to make sure that we're putting $1.75 of cheese, not $2.50 from the big guy's handful, and not $1.25 from the little guy's handful. So based on all that, shredded mozzarella is a system ingredient, so we have those conversions built in that we know how much volume weighs of it. So just with that equivalency there, we know that it could be in ounces and grams and cups and quarts, but we're going to get the right weight, which is how we're calculating our food cost. But our cooks are ultimately seeing what they need to see on that pizza recipe.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any questions on how I set up that cheese scoop?
Yeah, we can take a quick pause here and look at the chat. If anybody has any questions about what Sergio just showed, please don't be shy. Feel free to put questions in there. We can revisit anything. We have some time to do so.
Cool. Additionally, as I was saying, reading the room, meaning knowing who's reading the recipe. This is a great example of something along those lines. So this is a sandwich recipe from my old business, which was a sandwich shop, but with a full kitchen in the background behind it. So we can look at things like, I was doing the portions. I was having my cooks pre-slice this so that the kids at the counter just had to grab a portion of meat and cheese, 2 slices of provolone. Something like this jardiniere recipe. Of course, this is more of a culinary recipe in kilos and grams because I'm counting on this being prepared in the kitchen where they have access to scales. And the recipe that has jalapeno peppers and all this in it, I want to make sure that it's spot on and that they're getting this right so it's not too spicy or too bland. So here, having this recipe off to the side, the kids at the counter just need to know that they need 2 tablespoons of it. But say I need to scale this to different quantities. The third pan is how we defined it. That's a volume measurement, of course. So the standard batch makes 1 full third pan. Maybe we just need to make 1 quart of it. This is a great example of math I don't want my cooks doing. There's things in grams, there's things in head of cauliflower, cups of water, all kinds of different volumes. Here, they're getting exactly what they need by just saying, I need 1 quart. Or maybe they're slicing jalapeno peppers and they know there's no way they have as much as the recipe calls for. They have 2.5 cups of jalapeno peppers. Now they can scale the whole recipe based on what they have. They'll make a full batch tomorrow when the produce delivery comes with all the jalapenos they need. But again, ultimately, they don't have to figure out all this math, which would be 15, 20 minutes of back and forth, and then you wanting to double check it to make sure they got it right. Meez is taking a lot of that off your plate, so they're able to nail it and get it exactly right.
I would imagine that really helps save on waste as well when you're using exactly the right amount. Not only are you going to get a consistent recipe outcome every single time, but also it's just down to like the exact amount of the intent of that original recipe. And as Serge, as you showed in the beginning too, all of that batch sizing and also going even like from a specific ingredient that you have on hand, like this is how much, meat I have on hand. That all can be done from the viewer mode. So if you have a tablet in your kitchen where all your recipes can be accessed by the cooks, and it's only a viewer mode so that they can't edit the actual recipe, they can still do all of that scaling that Sergio's been showing. So
Yeah.
very, very cool. Awesome.
Without going in edit mode, as Nicole said, to minimize on waste too. Smart scaling is a great feature to minimize waste. We can get in the situation where maybe it's Sunday and we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays in a seasonal town. I'm sure somebody here has experienced this. And we're forecasting that we'll sell 32 of these sandwiches on that Sunday night. So now we look at that jardiniere mix again and say, do we need all these quarts? We actually only need 4 cups of it. So we could change this unit to cups. We definitely don't need 20 cups. We're going to be closed for a few days, or maybe we're going on vacation. Let's make 5 cups in case we sell more than 32 sandwiches, but then there's minimal waste going on here. It's just shy of a quarter batch, and they're going to make that exact amount. So we don't have 3 quarts of jardiniere to throw in the trash when we're closed.
Yeah. Yeah, the forecasting aspect for sure. Well, amazing. Any questions on that? Not
So
anything at the moment, but feel free to put anything in the chat as we keep going here.
cool. When it comes to portions, of course, setting a unit of measure equivalency on your portions is going to help you get there. So whether it's something that you have batched out like this, or let's see if we have something more like different type of recipe here, and we have this done by how many servings. So then we could scale it out when we needed 100 servings of this. And then we're able to, scale up. And, maybe it was a home recipe that we brought on board, and we could eventually turn this into our permanent recipe so that the team is looking at this on a regular basis.
That's great. I could see the value in that too for like a catering event or something like that, where you have different serving size for each event that's happening. You know what people are ordering and what you need to make for that too, for, those types of operations as well.
Yeah. One thing that I'm showing on this recipe is actually a clever little trick here is using the notes feature to put the allergens front facing. Now,
Mm.
if somebody does have a recipe in view mode, as I was showing that pork recipe, they actually do have, they don't have the tabs across the top here for nutrition, but if you want your cooks to have transparency in the allergens, so if all the managers have left for the day and server walks up to the pass and asks, hey, table 8 has a nightshade allergen, that nutritional information is here so the cooks can see it. And on this, what you were seeing here was an example of making this front facing. So if I share this with my team, they don't have to go look for that drop down. This is actually just a snapshot of that I put into the notes field here. Notes let you add any additional images or anything in bullet points or anything else like that. And what I did on this one is I took a screenshot of the allergens from the nutrition tab here and just dragged it over and dropped it here so that my cooks have it right on the front page. And maybe I want to print these recipes too, to have a backup copy. Then this will print on the printed recipe, whereas the nutrition tab will not. But if I've added this here and I want to have a hard copy of these recipes, or maybe we're just not at the point of sharing with tablets yet, then our allergens or any other information that we choose to put on here can be right on the front facing recipe. So here,
That's a really good little pro tip right there, Sergio, to put the allergens front and center. And it also demonstrates the fact that you can use images in the notes feature, like you showed. So you can drag and drop any images of any kind. In this case, like Serge said, it's a screenshot of something that's really pertinent for this particular um, recipe. But that's really cool. That's a
yeah.
really great pro tip right there.
Word of caution, though, of course, this is now, as Nicole said, just a picture. The
Right.
allergens there. These are dynamic. So if
Right.
I took up, one of the ingredients that brings in milk or nightshades, it'll change on real time on the nutrition tab, but I would have to take a new screenshot and move it over here. So
Right.
just a word of warning there, that I usually mention on these.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Um, Now, another thing that I think is calling ingredients exactly what your team calls them. Again, the important thing here is that your team is clear, and we don't want to create a system that is confusing things for people. If anything, me should clarify things for your cooks. Me should make it so that they're able to find exactly what they're looking for. And if it's not normally known as provolone picante in the kitchen, if you only buy one provolone, then take that meez ingredient and change the name. You can take any ingredient, go into edit mode and change its name, and you're not going to lose any of the unit of measure equivalency costing information that you've put in here. We're just going to call it provolone sandwiches or whatever, if there are other ones. But you can change your ingredient names simply like, just so that then in the recipes that they're on, we're going to see it reflected and seen as just provolone and nobody's confused saying, what is picante? I'm not sure.
Oh, Serge, that was a good little window there. Can you go back to the recipe or the ingredient and then where it shows all of the recipes that that ingredient is on?
Yep.
Perfect. Cool. So now when you made the change to simplify the name just to provolone, it will automatically update the name of that ingredient to those two recipes.
All the recipes that it's in. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome.
So
That's cool.
across here, we see that. And that's something that we've leveraged in situations, even when it comes to using meat system ingredients to show your recipes to cooks in another language. Then this onion that lives in 30 different recipes, we could change it to cebolla so that everybody would see it as cebolla or add a note to it. So that's another interesting feature there. That would be a lot of work changing all of your ingredients that way, but it's possible as well. And then you would have allergens and all that information as part of those.
Very cool.
So the other thing that can happen too is instead of, that provolone is you might be creating a custom ingredient. And when you create a custom ingredient, it might be because you want it to read exactly how your team is looking at it. So what we can do here is we can take something like, say instead of iceberg, we buy, or whatever the lettuce is, it has a slightly different name, or the cooks call it something else. They call it crunchy iceberg or something. Let's
You
do
can call it shreddis. They call it that at my local sandwich shop. The
I
shred.
love it.
Yeah.
Great. So we're going to call it shreddis. Now here we're creating a new ingredient. We could create a recipe that starts with iceberg and makes shredded lettuce, but for now let's call it shreddis. So 1 cup of shredded lettuce there. We've just created a custom ingredient, which means is going to then show us is now blank. And the unit of measure equivalency, this is the important thing to remember when creating a custom ingredient. It defaults to what we call standard weight to volume conversion. Standard is based on water or liquids of the same viscosity. 8 ounces is what a cup weighs. Within meez, though, we can basically borrow the properties of other ingredients. So we wanted to create shreddis as our own item here, but maybe we look for, whoops, even better, we will look for iceberg here. And we're going to grab the meez system ingredient for iceberg, and we're going to borrow those conversions here. So now we just pull that conversion, and we could even do the same thing for the prep action that gives us the shredded lettuce, assuming that shreddis will need a prep action like shredded. And we can also borrow that here from the meez conversion database and look for shredded, which sounds redundant, shreddis. But then that's exactly what we're going to do here is we're going to look for iceberg and that prep action shredded. And now you see it just borrowed that weight to volume conversion. So now our shredded shreddis has the same volume conversion properties as iceberg shredded. So that's a nice pro tip that a lot of people overlook is you're basically, our database is huge. There's almost 3,000 ingredients. Sometimes people don't want to use it because they call the ingredient something else. Don't let that stop you from borrowing our conversions. This little tab here or in the prep actions lets you continue to use our information without using our name if you want. And the importance of that being that these conversions are going to, even if you want your recipes to still read, in grams, there's going to be a situation where somebody dropped the scale on the floor, it's out of batteries, and somebody needs to measure this as accurately as they can without a scale. We don't want them measuring 56 teaspoons, of course. That's a waste of time, but we can at least get it pretty accurate by the cup. Cup and 1/8 or anything like that. So if you're using those system ingredients or when you create a custom ingredient, you're aware that you have those equivalencies, you're making your cook's life easier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Having it make sense for your specific kitchen is going to make things much easier for everyone involved. If you're using the nomenclature that they're used to, or even how the customers are ordering it, it really helps with that consistency and the triggering in the head. Like, okay, that's what we're talking about here. Takes the guesswork out of that. So I love that. Thank you, Sergio.
Of course.
Well, are there any, success stories, Sergio, where you've been working with someone and you've seen them kind of go from like they came to meez with some issues that they were hoping that it would solve, and kind of like how meez was able to help them achieve their goals?
Yep.
Consistency and things of that nature.
Yep. So if anybody is on the call who would share, their own story, their business, I can't share the names of these businesses, but I can tell you when I first started a couple of years ago, talking to a restaurant group that is prolific is in the least, is at the minimum, many restaurants, but within one restaurant they were talking about how they just can't figure out why this hollandaise sauce is completely different from literally at the same restaurant but lunch shift, night shift. And we all know that just depends on who's the daytime sous chef, nighttime sous chef, teaching people a different technique. And so getting that one source of truth across everything, and the executive chef is signing on it and saying, AM, PM, this is how you make it. This is how I want it made every time. Again, put a little time investment into recording a video of it, but now everybody has it the way you want it done, or whoever you want to record that video. Another really, and this was innovative in that it taught me a little bit about how to use meez, is these recipes that I showed before, like with all the images, the prep steps here. I have a chef who's been running a ski area for years. And if anybody's familiar with, any highly seasonal place, but ski areas in particular are famous for, they're going to hire 100 cooks for you. Winter season's coming, but you got one day to train them. We open tomorrow and you get one day of training and orientation. So he started taking these recipes, he started taking me's and creating walkthroughs, just walking through the kitchen and saying, okay, we're going to the meat walk-in now and doing a tour of the meat walk-in where the proteins are held. Now, this is the dairy walk-in, this is dry storage, this is where the spices live. A series of videos that he put into a recipe called line cook orientation. And then for different, bar back orientation, whatever, just giving them material so that on their onboarding, he said it was a room full of cooks sitting there staring at their phones watching these videos, but it got through the orientation and they're seeing, real video of your kitchen. So you jump right into now training them on how to cook and you're not wasting hours of your time showing them around and showing them where things live or processes that you could have easily put into a video ahead of time. So that's been one great success story that I love seeing because, again, this is year after year now. He's bringing a totally different team of cooks in every year. Again, if you're familiar with ski areas, and they're not even there to cook, they could care less about cooking. They're there to ski, but you have materials to put into them so that you can hold them accountable for that and pull their pass when you need to. Then you have, rolling out station guides, getting, me's in front of people where we had one customer success story where the general manager told us that it felt like cloning their best trainer,
Wow.
where they were just able to have this material in front of them. And again, if their best trainer is the guy recording these videos, this is the next best thing to having that guy literally hanging out at their station all day.
Yeah.
Going through that. Okay.
I had someone, Sergio, it was a brand new me's customer. So I was doing like an onboarding call, helping them through it. And they were a country club. And he said, we are repeat customers because these are country club members who are coming and expecting they want to order their favorite thing. They're expecting it to taste the same every single time. And something that Meez was solving for them was that consistency of making those recipes as intended and the same every time because people will notice, especially if they're ordering a lot of the same menu items, their favorite menu items from the where they're a member, and they're not gonna be very happy if it doesn't taste the same as it did before. So yeah, just seeing how Meez can really help these kitchens produce consistent, delicious food. So that's
Yeah.
great.
And the interesting part of that story, Nicole, too, is that for a lot of chefs and probably a lot of people on this call, the customers who are going to complain and say something is almost a luxury because if you're the owner
Right,
of the restaurant, you often don't get that feedback. They just
right.
come back. They were
They
here
just
a week
yeah,
ago and they had this amazing dish. They brought their friends in to have the same amazing dish. It tasted differently. If you're lucky, they'll talk to somebody about it. But for the most part, we all know they're just not going to come back. And that's what literally one of the things that makes the restaurant business so tough is you want that feedback and you often don't get it. You can put out a suggestion box, a comment box, or whatever, and what you end up getting instead is what? Yelp reviews, which nobody.
yeah. Yeah. Right, right. Yeah. Well, excellent. Um,
Right.
so Serge, I want to ask you, well, first we'll pause again. If anyone has any questions and wants to chime in, um, if it's easier for you to ask your question, we can also give you the ability to ask audibly. So just put in the chat if you're interested in chiming in here um, to learn some more here. But ooh, I like what you're showing here. This is a good one. I'm gonna
Yeah, I'm
stop
showing different
asking questions
examples.
because I'm interested in what's on the screen. So go ahead, Serge.
Yeah, I'm showing different examples of, using those notes for different things like images or bullet pointed lists or hyperlinks can be in here too. So maybe there's a really cool YouTube channel that you found for somebody who builds cheese boards. There's a couple of them I know. And you want to put that link in here so they kind of get seasoned up on it. That's a great place to do it. Additionally is just, I was just building this because this is what my business had a lot to do is building cheese plates, cheese boards. But this is a great way not just to train your staff to make beautiful cheese boards, but if anybody has ever done this, it's a constant struggle how to cost cheese boards because, this recipe, I made it for one. And what if we need, cheese for 200 people? Are we using these quantities? Sometimes you might pare that down. That's a different story, but at least we're able to get the cost of this down per serving and we're able to cost this out and give a customer a real price for it. If it's for 200 people, then are we discounting it? Are we doing anything there? But we're able to scale this to whatever proportions they need for that reason, for costing, and also for training our cooks, our cheese platter makers, cheesemongers, if you will.
I'm tuning in from California. It's my lunchtime, and this is making me hungry. Um, yeah, that's very cool. I love that diagram too. That's another example of an image, the diagram on the that you have. Yeah, that one right there. Yeah, there's another sample image that you can put right into the recipe. So there's no confusion, and I'm someone who really enjoys process, and I like when there's like I was saying, a source of truth, and to have this to look at and go off of would be really helpful for me in a kitchen for sure. But I'm no chef, so I leave that to the expert. Cool.
Um, Great. So, haven't seen questions yet. Wanted to make sure everybody who did have a question had a chance to chime in if you needed to. Um, so when we're talking about, possible like pro tips, one of the biggest things that I suggest to people when you start building recipes, and I think I've already mentioned it, use the meez system ingredients or use the prep actions. Use all that information that we've programmed into meez. It's there for you, whether it's a unit of measure conversion, creating your own unit of measure for yields, or creating ingredients. There is a ton of information that you can use. Um, your cooks on view mode, they do have access to help and support if they needed to. So a tablet would be able to say, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? You probably don't want them getting too distracted on that, but sometimes it might be as easy as, hey, the recipe's not loading, and they might help us identify an issue if something like that is going on. But is there any questions on, best practices for sharing with your team, setting up tablets in the kitchen, practices like that? We're here for it. Um, Starting small is another pro tip I can give, building out one station at a time and getting meticulous with all the details that they need like that. But I think once you get flowing in meez, once you start building recipes, the process starts becoming easier as you're doing more reps. And you're probably going to get to the point where you're like, you know what? I'm cranking through these. I can delegate the pictures or the videos to somebody who's in the kitchen more than I am. Or you're going to take a day to just go in the kitchen and, hey, you're making that? Let's stop. Glad I caught you at the beginning. I want to get a picture of every step to add to the meez recipe. So in those instances, those can be really good tips for getting started. Most importantly, when you're trying to make the transition, and we've seen all shapes and sizes of transitions, of course, if you're launching a brand new restaurant and you're starting with meez, that's a great place to start because, as we say, working on the airplane that's already at 30,000 feet can be a little tricky. You're already open. You're busy as heck. You're implementing meez. You want your cooks looking at meez. They are stubborn. Some of these cooks have been in your kitchen longer than you have. How do you get them to change habits? One thing that I tell people, if you're really wanting them to start looking at this, you set up that tablet in the kitchen, lock up the recipe books, put them in the office. Of course, you don't want to get rid of them, like the printed recipe books, or maybe you're eventually going to print them from meez to refresh it, but make them like a in case of emergency break glass situation and start to create those habits. Building change culture is not easy, but we're always happy to send you materials or send you best tips on sharing with the team. And for large groups, I do it all the time where I have a quick 15-minute call and they just get all their viewers that are in the kitchen. They all share one tablet and we go through real quick how to search for what they're looking for, how to scale recipes, and they're off to the races. They're using it and they're finding it easier and they're finding it, hey, now I know how to scale that. Now I know if I just can't find that tablespoon measure, okay, I'm doing it in cups or in teaspoons or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
All right.
I don't see any questions. We'll give it a few minutes. We'll hang out for a bit. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Some key takeaways. We talked about how inconsistency, you might be more inconsistent than you realize, and this is how meez can really address consistency issues. Meez gives you a centralized, media-rich recipe, real-time updates, and smart scaling platform to house all of your important recipes that you want to be made perfectly every single time. And in the spirit of the name of this webinar, train once and execute always across every shift, every location, every time. So thank you again for joining. We'll hang out here for a few minutes in case any questions come to mind. And yeah, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, Sergio, for your demos as well.
Of course. A couple other tips I wanted to share is we don't provide tablets currently, but I have sent this to many, many people, is searching eBay for tablets is a great place to go. Uh, because you're always going to find, and I think we've got it to sixth generation is what we are looking at recently, can be like the lowest tier that will still run me seamlessly. And please ask us if you're shopping and you want more direction than that. Of course, Meez can run on Samsung tablets too. So searching on eBay for groups like this, when you see that they have a lot of them and they're selling them for a good price, that refurbished, there's companies who just want to make sure their staff always has the latest and greatest technology. So they will send these in, they get refurbished, and you pick them up for ridiculous prices. I've deployed a lot of these and recommended it to a lot of customers. If they have the eBay good refurbished, they're often even covered by warranty. I wouldn't go with just pre-owned from one single seller, but again, when you find some of these and it says that they have a bunch of them for sale, more than 10 available, 309 sold, pretty good bet you're getting, product that might have a scratch on it or something, but they're going to work great for using these in the kitchen. And I know people don't want to make a $300-400 investment on a tablet that's going in your kitchen, where it's likely going to get covered in grease and ooze and whatnot, God knows what. So there's a good place to start until you've come up with the protocols for people not to destroy the tablets and get people sharing that way. There's
Hey,
also clamps, that you can find, tablets, stands. I found those on Amazon before, whether you want a tabletop one or one that clamps. But feel free to reach out, sergio@meez.com. Happy to share a few links on the clamps or stands that I've recommended in the past, because that's a great starting place to get everybody going digital.
that's awesome, Serge. I'm going to start suggesting this as well. And you actually made me think too when you said, you don't want it in your kitchen. It's gonna it's gonna get all saucy and things like that. What's nice about a tablet, you can just wipe it off. But if you had your recipe in a paper format, that's no good. So that's going in the trash. Whereas like the tablet, you just wipe it right off and it's good to go.
Yeah. And even with the sheet protectors, everybody knows, they end up getting pulled out of the sheet protectors or smeared anyway. Cassie,
Yeah.
I see your question. A tablet per station. That is totally, I think that's a good way to go, but there might not be need for that. Like if you have three cooks working on one station and they look at the same recipes, that would probably work. If there's one station that has 12 cooks, and you might end up with a little bit of a log jam. And you can also always share directly on people's phones. So you could have, your cooks logging in on their phone and viewing recipes there as well. I always also, throw caution in there. Every chef knows, do they want cooks pulling their phones out in the kitchen or not? I was a hard no on that. But again, that was 20 years ago. And these days things are different. I've had people tell me, boy, you haven't been in kitchens in a while. If they can't see something on their phone, they won't look at it at all. The problem obviously with sharing directly to their email addresses, kitchens unfortunately are a bit of a revolving door. So then you got to make sure you're tracking every employee's access, and when they walk out or you terminate them, you want to shut down their access. um, but again, that's either tablet per station. What you want to think about, Cassie, I think, is, do you have, a station that needs to see a different set of recipes? And that's a good way to look at it. Like, the best way I think to share is, rather than just adding somebody to my concept as a viewer, then they're going to see all my recipes in view mode. I probably can be more specific and just have my pastry team view desserts only. And I can share that with the pastry team or the pastry kitchen, pastry tablet at myrestaurant.com. That's a shared tablet for the pastry team, but then they only see these 42 desserts. Maybe I share plated desserts and pastry prep with that station. And then that's all they see. They don't have to go through cocktails or sift through a bunch of other stuff. They're literally only going to see what you've assigned to them.
Sergio, you brought up an excellent point while you were explaining that too, of like, because of the sort of turnover and access to these recipes and things like that, you could have an email address like associated with the station, like you said, and that's the login. So that way you're not having to manage the logins in that way. You're just managing per station. Maybe you're changing the password every so often so they can't access it, away from the kitchen. But yeah, that's a pretty cool thing. And the recipe books really come in handy for organization, especially if you're working with a lot of recipes or different
Yeah.
types of recipes. Yeah.
Yeah. And recipe books too. The good thing to know is that recipes can live across many multiple recipe books. So maybe I want to have a recipe book that's called chocolate desserts. So I could easily move any chocolate dessert here and add them to a recipe book called chocolate desserts, but they'll still remain in this one. So that in that sense, recipe books can be like a tag system almost. But then you can just share the desserts book, and maybe chocolate desserts is a recipe book that you don't necessarily share out with anyone. That one's there for yourself. So when you need chocolate desserts, you go into that book to find which one you're going to roll out next.
Awesome. Great question. Thank you.
Okay. For additional questions, we will be sending everybody a link to the recording of this. But additional questions, you can always reach us at support@getmeez.com for support related issues. If Nicole or myself is your customer success manager, our emails are Sergio@getmeez and Nicole@getmeez.com. And yeah, these webinars, when we do it, it's the final one in a series that we start in the spring. But we will launch another series, and stay tuned to the meez community for that, where we will announce them and they'll also go out via emails.
Yeah, there's also you can view our past webinars as well. If you just go to getmeez.com and go to the webinars page of our website, you can look at some of our past recordings, and they're categorized by topic. So if there's anything in particular interested in learning more about, it's going to be on our website under the webinar tab. And I see Sergio pulling it up right now. Thank you, Serge.
Mhm.
You're like my Vanna White. Perfect. There we go. So
So
here's your
getmeez.com webinars, and you will see other ones that we've done in the past.
I
As
really
well.
like the one on menus. That one's really interesting. So keep an eye out for the menus one. That's a really insightful one on the menu analytics and how you can use the menus feature, which we didn't talk about much today. So that would be a good one to go check out if you haven't already.
Yeah.
But
Also in the meez community, you will find a whole section on webinars somewhere.
is it under classrooms or was it under events?
It's under something. I thought it was a whole section here called webinars.
I have it on mine for sure. It's under classrooms. If you open the classrooms tab, essential topic. Let's see. Oh, well, these
Anyway,
are
they're
these
here,
are.
folks. I promise. Oh, I think it's I'm not
Oh, you're not a
I'm
member.
not
Got
logged
it.
into the
You're not
community.
logged in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Cool.
Okay, folks.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. We will wrap up and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you, Serge.
Thank you all for your time today.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers, everyone.